Hey guys, welcome to Haunted Tales from the Old Rocking Chair. This is your host, Chris Spencer. We're getting ready to start. I think I got all the bugs worked out. Hope everything works out as planned. I hope you guys enjoy the show. And as always, I'll be here live with you guys if you want to chat in the comments. But I think we're just going to go ahead and get started.
Here at the Rift Radio Network would like to welcome you to tonight's special broadcast. This work is protected by Creative Commons license. And now, a word from our sponsors. Staunton, Virginia this fall to experience the creepiest place around. Take part in the Ghost of Staunton Tours, produced by Marty Siebel and the residents of Staunton. Ticket prices range from $8 to $13. Private group rates are available. Learn more and investigate the tales of Mary Baldwin from the Mary Baldwin College, the Old Western State Mental Asylum, and much more. For tour times, ticket prices, and dates, visit their website at www.ghostofstaunton.com or call 540-448-2743. Available tour dates are limited and filling up fast. Make sure to secure your reservations for this fall season. Get out of the house and become a part of history. The Ghost of Staunton Tours, only in Virginia's Shenandoah Valley. CDC guidelines are followed, and for questions, please visit www.ghostofstaunton.com or call 540-448-2743. The Skeleton Key. This mystical shop, found exclusively on Facebook, is stationed in Blossom, Texas. Purchase all of your very own unique religious, spiritual, and metaphysical items, to include the beginner altar kits. Find them today on Facebook. Remember, you've always had the key.
Welcome to the Haunted Tales from the Old Rocking Chair. And now your host, Christina Spencer.
Well, hello there. Come on in and get cozy by the fireplace. Let me get settled into my old rocking chair and I'll tell you a couple stories. Haunting stories. Stories that are not for the faint of heart. Some of these stories may not be about hauntings per se, but nonetheless will haunt you. Because after all, some of the most scary things in life are not ghosts and demons, but the people we cross on the street. If you're brave enough, keep listening. If not, get up and leave now, because you'll never be the same. Don't say I didn't warn you. Welcome to the Haunting Stories from the Old Rocking Chair. I Can See You, written by user Bella_1021. My terrifying story happened when I was about 16. Now I'm almost 21. I've only stayed at home alone twice in my life. This time wasn't at first anything unusual or scary at all, but the night I am writing about, I will remember for the rest of my life. At about 11 p.m., I was on my phone talking with my friend when I heard a strange noise outside. It was like someone or something hitting the trash bin outside. I thought that maybe that was my neighbor's cat. I told my friend about that and she laughed and said that maybe that was a ghost. We started joking about the ghost, and about an hour later we finished our conversation and I hung up. I checked all the doors downstairs and decided to go to bed. I brushed my teeth and turned off all the lights. When I was lying in bed, I realized I left my phone downstairs and I needed to go get it. When I got to the bottom of the staircase, I looked at the big window in the living room and froze with fear. In the window, I saw a black silhouette of a man just standing on the patio, staring right into the house. I was so scared that I couldn't move. After a while of just standing there frozen, I sprinted to the kitchen. Grabbing the phone, I called my uncle. He's a policeman and lived on the same street. I was so terrified that I only could whisper to him, "Someone is standing on the patio." When my uncle arrived, the man on the patio saw the car coming and started running away. My uncle gave chase but wasn't able to catch him. He then came back to my house and tried to calm me down because I had immediately burst into tears when I saw him. That night my uncle stayed with me at my house and told my aunt that they were going to be taking care of me at their house for a few days. Just a few days later, after my parents came home, I got a call from my uncle who told me that just a day ago there was a man standing on the patio of his neighbor's house and the police had finally caught him. He said that supposedly the man was insane because when they arrested him, he just kept saying, "I can see you," and laughed maniacally over and over. Well, after several years, I'm still terrified when I think about what could have happened if I hadn't come downstairs that night. I spent a week in my dad's haunted house, written by Megan. When I was 13, my parents divorced. A few years later, when I was 16, my dad moved 8 hours north of where I was living to be closer to his sick father. He and his then girlfriend, let's call her Dee, moved into a house and shortly after asked my brother and me to visit. I was the only one to go the first time because my brother just didn't want to. He's 2 years younger than me, and it's likely he didn't want to leave home for a week to go somewhere so far away. So my dad picks me up and drives us back to his house. The house was on a corner lot, so the driveway was at the side, and there was also a detached garage at the top of the driveway. From the driveway, I could see into the living room. There were 2 windows, and even the master bedroom window that was upstairs. When you walked into the side door, stairs were going into the basement on the right, and there was a door at the bottom that was usually closed. There was a bedroom down there and a laundry room. Side note, there was a pole in the basement that was dated 1912. It looked like it could have been part of a railroad. On the other side of the entrance, a couple of stairs were going up into the kitchen. There was also a door here that was always closed. From the kitchen, the stairs were on your right. The dining room was straight. From the dining room, the living room was on the right. And to the left, there was a small, cold room. Upstairs, the bathroom is straight at the top of the tiny landing, and there are 2 bedrooms on either side. This house was very old and had many spooky sounds when it settled, but it also made a very distinct sound when someone came up the stairs and stood on the landing. The stairs creaked usually, but when someone was walking on them, it made an entirely different noise. It's also worth mentioning that the door handles were not standard door knobs. I can't remember if they were a pull-up latch or if it had a little thing you pressed to open it. Either way, it had a latch, which made a very distinct noise when someone opened and closed a door. The closest thing I can find was a Suffolk thumb latch, if you wanted to see what I meant. As soon as we got there, I felt weird. I kept seeing someone standing in the bedroom window staring down at us. There wasn't anyone physically standing there, but I could see it in my head. When we walked in, I had this rush of understanding and saw a man upstairs walking around. I knew that I would hear him walking around, and I also saw a little boy who ran out from the living room into the kitchen and yelled boo. Obviously, this freaked me out, and I tried to ignore it because I was tired. And maybe that's why I was thinking these things. I didn't mention anything to my dad or Dee, but brought my stuff upstairs to get ready for bed. I couldn't sleep because I kept hearing someone walking up and down the stairs. They'd walk up, stand on the landing, turn, and walk back down. I even opened the door because maybe it was my dad or Dee, forgetting something downstairs, but there was no one there. There was a closet in my room that was very tiny, and it freaked me out. I don't know if it was just the weird size, as I am 5 foot tall, and I was taller than it, or if it was something else. I kept having this image in my head of the door opening, and I spent most of the night just staring at it. Most nights, I would hear someone on the stairs, or they would be pacing at the bottom of my bed. I would hear singing coming through the vents, and I thought it was the radio, but my dad assured me there was no radio on. I also opened the windows to make sure it wasn't a neighbor, and finally assumed it was the furnace. It sounded like a man singing opera almost. I couldn't make out the words, but there was definitely a tune. There were a few nights where I heard cupboard doors opening or slamming shut. Some mornings they would all be open and drawers pulled out. The curtains in the living room fell off the rod, and the rod was still in the window. The sound of chairs being dragged from the dining room into the living room or back kept me up. One night Dee's son came over, and the 4 of us played Monopoly. We'll call him R. R and I are very close in age, so it was a typical night. Out of nowhere, I hear someone walking upstairs and my door latch opening. I knew my door was closed because I kept it closed, and the door swinging open. R and I looked at the ceiling simultaneously and then to each other, and he goes, "Did you hear that?" The closet in the room was scaring me, so I nailed it shut. The nails were in the door frame, resting on the door, so if I needed to get in, I could still open it. A little while later, I go upstairs with Dee and bring a towel out of that closet, and the nails are sticking straight out as if someone opened the door, and there were some on the floor. All 3 of us were downstairs for the whole day beforehand. Until this point, I had tried to justify a lot of this because they were mostly just noises. The cupboards could be from the house settling, etc. Then Dee's mom called one morning and said, "I just talked to a woman from Winnipeg who knew your uncle. She told me that he came to her in a dream and told her he had to find you because there is a spirit in your new house that's bothering you and him," which was me. I think that was the turning point for me. I became a believer in that moment. I have never met this woman. I don't even know her name. And how did she know I was there when I didn't live there? At that specific time, I also lived in Ontario. I don't even think that Dee's parents knew I was visiting. This woman told us to get a picture of him, the uncle, and put it in the bedroom, and he would find us and help us. The day we got the picture, I was too afraid to sleep in my room, so my dad slept in there. I slept in his bed with Dee. She was very sick. She said she'd been sleeping on and off all day, and was sleeping all night soundly. So I stayed up most of the night because I was scared, and I kept hearing two men downstairs arguing. It was muffled, like when you hear talking through the walls or floor, but can't make out what is being said. It sounded like a heated argument based on the tone, and I was trying to ignore it. I moved the blankets away from my face to breathe because I had my whole head covered, and I see this man right in front of me, and he is angry. He is staring at me, and his face is inches away from mine, and I could see all the lines on his weathered face. He vanished, and I went back under the blankets, terrified. After this, I went home a day or two early because it scared me so bad. Dee told me other stories, like him following her up the stairs and talking to her, sitting at the end of the bed and watching them sleep, the sound of someone getting change and coins rolling across the floor every morning, and the smell of cologne from the landing. She also told me that one day she came home from work and heard someone walking around upstairs whistling. She thought it was my dad, so she ignored it. And when she went upstairs to talk to him a little while later, no one was upstairs. She was so scared that she drove to my dad's work and waited for him there. There were also stories of someone wearing heavy boots come in through the front door and walk up the small staircase and then stop at the entrance to the kitchen. A few times she thought it was my dad and found it weird he didn't come in, then finding no one was there upon opening the door. This is one of my stranger stories. I know a lot more happened during this week, and I just can't remember because it was so long ago. This experience turned me into a believer. Shadow Creature, written by user Raven Wings 7. When I was 25, I lived on the south side of Chicago in an apartment with my son and my ex-fiance. Everything was fine for the first couple of months. One day we were about to leave to go to the store when my ex tells me how he saw what looked like a black mist that flew across the living room. I didn't know what to say, but in my head I'm just like, great, here we go. I don't know when the apartment was built exactly, but you could tell it was pretty old still. Nothing happened for a few weeks, but I noticed my fiance acting strange. He started drinking a lot, and we started arguing because he started accusing me of things I was definitely not doing. Even after a while, it seemed like he stopped caring suddenly, stopped trying, etc. And when he'd get upset about something I had to say to him, he got in my face and aggressively started yelling at me, and we'd end up fighting. This went on for a while before I was about to just give up because he was drinking so much he couldn't even walk to the bathroom. If we went out, he embarrassed me, and he'd start shit with people. It basically just got worse. One day when he was at work, I was cleaning my son's bedroom. The door was open on my left, and I was putting something in his drawers. I felt a sudden sense of anxiety. I looked to my left. As soon as I did, something swiftly shot down my hallway. It was all black, low to the ground, almost looked like it was running on all fours. I quickly stuck my head out and looked, and it was gone. Towards the entry door to my apartment, I felt a chill go up my spine. About an hour later, my neighbors, a couple, started fighting. They were screaming at the top of their lungs at each other. He was screaming at her for some of the same things, and she was crying. In my head, it started to click. Through the next 2 days, my son woke up screaming, "Mommy!" I jolted up and ran to his room. I turned the light on and he was crying and screaming. I asked him what was wrong and he pointed to his closet. I asked him what it was and he didn't say anything. I comforted him until he calmed down and then closed the closet door. It happened again the next night, but this time he said, "Mommy, someone's there." My son left it open before he went to sleep, so I told him to start closing it, which he did. The next day, I was in my bedroom when I heard a loud thump come from his bedroom, and he ran out of it screaming and crying. A parent's worst nightmare. I held him, and he wouldn't say anything at first. I asked him, of course, what had happened, and if he was hurt. He finally calmed down, and he said, "The black hen pushed me. It pushed me in the door." I became furious and found myself yelling at something I couldn't see, telling it to get the F out of here. I had my son in my room playing Minecraft while I banished it and went around sealing off the place. It must have gone into the neighbors across and below me because they were being really toxic. The ones below wouldn't have believed me, but I told my girl across the hall because she did card readings for me before. So I told her to do the same. It was a bit late for me and my ex-fiancé because I found out he was actually talking to another girl and he cheated on me. So I kicked him out anyways. Then I got a sob story that he had gotten her pregnant. Even knowing what happened, I obviously couldn't stay with him. I stayed there for a few months longer and didn't have any problems except with the neighbors below me occasionally, or feeling like something was watching me as I was doing my laundry. I eventually moved out to where I live now, and luckily, it didn't follow me. Something Unexplainable in the Smokey Mountains, written by user uwodahikamama. I've debated on posting this. It sounds crazy, but it actually happened, and my ex experienced it as well. We still bring it up from time to time. So I used to live on an EBCI reservation in the Smoky Mountains. There's a spot called Thomas Divide, and it's been known for decades to have unexplained floating orbs. You're supposed to pull off at the lookout, flash your lights 3 times at the mountains, and wait. It's a known phenomenon that's even been written about. One night, my ex and I decided to go check it out. We drove up to the pull-off at night, parked on the left part of the clearing, turned off the vehicle, flashed our lights 3 times at the mountains below, and waited. It's dark out, but the pull-off has basically a gravel clearing surrounded by woods, and the moon was full so you could see the whole area very well. We could both see the entire area around the car, and there was no one else there. We both had our windows rolled down. Most of the pull-off area we were in is to my right, since we pulled in more to the left, and we were facing towards the mountains. We were just talking, having a nice time, and my ex flashed his lights 3 times again, since nothing had happened yet. I have my arm hanging out of the window, and I'm looking up at the stars, and I loudly announce that this is stupid and nothing is happening. Well, immediately after my announcement, we start hearing the sound of footsteps at the end of the clearing. They were heading in our direction, towards my side of the car. They were coming faster, but sounded light and quick, like they belonged to a small person, so maybe like a child running. I am a skeptic first, and figured there must be an explanation. It's quite bright from the moon, so I can see everything, but I'm just not seeing anything running in my direction. I can only hear the gravel crunching and the sound of footsteps. I start hanging out of my window, straining to see what could be heading in our direction, because obviously there must be an explanation, right? And I wanted to see what was coming towards us. The footsteps came right up to my car door, and something physically hits my door. I'm hanging out of the window at this point, looking at my door and the ground next to it, and never saw a thing. However, whatever invisible thing that ran up to hit my door with enough force that it made a banging sound, like someone had punched it and the car rocked slightly. You can see and hear the impact, but could not see what made it. My ex's eyes got big and asked if that was me that did that. He thought I was playing with him, and though he had heard the footsteps and knew those had nothing to do with me, I told him hell no, I didn't do that. He reversed his car as fast as possible and sped out of there and back home as fast as he could. He was looking all around outside as well once we heard the footsteps, but he never saw was making the footsteps either. He could only hear them. Never to be Seen Again, written by wiedergaengerr. This is a story my parents told me. It happened in the mid-90s. My German parents just started dating a couple of months ago at this time, and they did a little weekend getaway to Prague. They had a great time, and on their last day, they decided to do a guided city tour. Since Prague is a popular city for Germans, they quickly found a tour in German. The guide was super nice, and they quickly made new friends in the group. It was another young couple from Germany, and they planned on having drinks afterwards together since they got along so very well. The tour took around 3 hours, and the last stop was at some kind of tower. Everyone wanted to get up there except the young man my parents chatted with the whole time. He said he was already very tired and offered to wait next to the entry and that everyone could leave their bags with him. My parents and the man's girlfriend went up there. They had a great view, and when they came back down after maybe 15 minutes, the man was nowhere to be found. All the bags were still in front of the bench where he wanted to rest. Nothing was missing. His girlfriend immediately felt very uneasy since her man usually was very dutiful and would never just leave, especially with all the personal belongings unattended. Most people left after a while, but my parents waited with the young woman. They assumed that he got sick or something and asked at every shop and bar near the spot if they saw him. No one did. He was nowhere to be found. My parents later brought her to the police, where she filed a missing persons report for him. They also checked every hospital in the city. The next day, my parents had to go back home. They did exchange phone numbers to catch up. They talked to her on a regular basis for several years, but the information did not change over the years. The man was nowhere to be found. Especially during the 90s, the Czech Republic was known to have a huge problem with human and especially organ trafficking. It was nothing new for the police in Prague that especially tourists would just disappear. The police told the woman that someone probably lured him into a building or a quiet side road by asking for help. You can imagine what probably happened from there on. My parents talked to the woman for the last time about 10 years ago. She was then happily married and had 2 kids, but she said that not a single day passed where she did not think about her young lover, and if he could still be out there, somewhere. My House is Getting Uncomfortable, written by Anonymous. I have lived in my house for almost a year. Almost immediately, things were a little weird. I was hanging decor in the hallway, and I felt threatened. That's the best way I can describe it. I was on edge, hairs on my arms standing up. Then about a week later, I heard a man and a woman talking in my stepson's room. I went in thinking his laptop or TV had been left on, but no. He is only here every other weekend, and this wasn't a weekend. I hear them talking a lot these days, in the main floor and the basement. I can never make out what they are saying. My daughter comes down the stairs on a regular basis, telling me I called her name when I didn't. She has also woken up to me telling her to get up, but again, I didn't. Then last week, I was doing dishes and I heard a noise from the window. My daughter will tap on it when she's outside and wants my attention. I saw a woman, her face smack dab in the middle of the window. I moved to the window and she shot to the left and was gone. Now my daughter is 5'2" and she has to stand on 2 pallets and a concrete block just to peek over the bottom of the window. So this lady was tall or something else. Now my daughter has come to me and said that she cries a lot at night. Like she'll be watching TikTok and will just bawl for about 10 minutes and then be fine. I chalk this up to hormones as she's 12. But a couple nights ago, I heard crying, inconsolable. It was like her favorite pet had died, wailing. I knocked on the door to the upper level and asked her if she was okay, and if she wanted to talk. She came out of her brother's room on the main floor. She wasn't even in her room. She had been playing with the kittens we were fostering. More and more, I don't like it here. I work from home on a 2-week alternating schedule. I hate being here alone. My daughter is also on an every other day schedule for school. In the building one day, e-learning at home the next. She doesn't like being here alone. My husband has never had any kind of experiences here, and now he wants to buy the home. I don't want to live here forever. My Old Ghost Neighbor. Written by user last_following. I was around 8. Me and my family were living in New Orleans. I was playing in an area outside my house, and I noticed this older Haitian man who lived a few houses down was sitting under one of our apple trees. We lived so close, I would occasionally go play cards at his house, since he lived alone and my parents thought he was lonely. The man was in a wheelchair, and I sat down near him and talked to him under the tree. He gave me an apple, but it was incredibly sweet and unlike anything I had tasted before or since. We talked a bit, and he told me that he will see me again, and walked away. Later that day, we found out he had died the night before, and even later in life I found out the man was some sort of voodoo priest from his granddaughter, who I was friends with. She also claimed to see him from time to time. The story did not end here, as I saw the man a few more times. We would talk, and he would always give me an apple. I even continued to see him. Though we moved out of the country around 4 more times, he stopped, showing up when I entered middle school. I chalked him up as my imaginary friend. I saw him again in a crowd at my high school graduation. I looked at him, and he had disappeared. As I was into voodoo at this point, it did not faze me that much, and I realized he may have been more than an imaginary friend. The last time I saw him, and the most recent time, was 2 years ago. I was in a really, really dark place. I was in a crappy job, and my girlfriend had just left me, and I was really depressed. I was battling with alcohol and other illicit substance addiction, and I was actually considering ending it all. And right when I was going to drink a bunch and probably jump off my balcony, I saw the man on the couch. He told me that he'd missed seeing me, but knew I had been busy. We had played cards, which was Go Fish, our old game. He actually got me back down, and right before he left, he said if I give him all of my Coke, then he would leave me some apples, and I agreed. He gave me a few, and then I passed out, and when I woke up, I still had the apples, but all of my Coke was gone. He is one of the main reasons I stopped doing the stuff, and did not get that badly addicted to them, and he probably saved my life. The Mansion Grounds, written by user TutuTrap. I'm a 28-year-old female and went to a boarding school from 11 years old. It is a professional ballet school in Hertfordshire, England, housed in a huge mansion. I won't say the name of the school explicitly here, but a quick Google of Trigg Park Mansion and you'll be able to see the building and its grounds. Off the top of my head, the mansion itself was built in the 1500s and then added to over the next 200 to 300 years as it changed hands from royalty to the Rothschild family. I expected it to be a hotbed of paranormal stuff. I'm actually fairly cynical, but I was open to seeing something. I had several encounters over the years of training there. Perhaps I'll share more of this one if this is well received, but this is a story about something actually touching me. I was 17 or 18, coming to the end of my studies, and on this night I was out past curfew. At this point, I was a bit of a hotshot because I was top of my class at the top of the school, so I flaunted a lot of the rules, and the security team and I were friends. I was walking up the mansion drive. I tripped the big iron mason gate lock and eased my way in. It's cold out, but I immediately feel a deepening of the cold and like a slight dampening of sound. I think nothing of it. I'm young and warm and had just been having a totally against the rules after dark hookup with another female student who lived in a boarding house down in the village of Trigg. You could have slapped me and I wouldn't have cared. I digress. I continued to walk up the right path of the fork and past this old stable building with a huge black and white clock on the front. Clock House. The building itself was now the male boarding house, affectionately dubbed Cog House, and often I could look up at the windows and wave at the older boys smoking out their bedroom windows. Tonight, however, I'm very aware there was nobody there, and now I'm suddenly alive to how weird everything feels in the grounds, and that's when I hear movement behind me. Cog House is on my right, and on my left a row of trees stretching back behind me. The trees are separated by roads, the first going straight up to the mansion's car park and front door, the second that circles around to the mansion's stealthier, darker rear entrance past the stables. I'm standing about 50 yards away from the servants' entrance back door, and the trees I've just passed are being disturbed. Not altogether in a flurry of leaves and birds, but one at a time getting closer and closer. A fierce rustling. Birds fly and scream, then silence. Repeat, repeat, repeat. All this time I'm frozen because I know the more gruesome tales of this particular property, and I know something is moving up behind me. I'm inching around to see what it could be, hoping beyond all hope it's just a security guard messing with me, when the light bulb directly above and behind me sputters out and shatters. Like full-on horror movie screaming at the television to run, you dumb bitch, shatters. You think I'd be running screaming by now, but honestly what I saw next had me totally rooted. In the gloomy light that Clock House was putting out, I see a man and a dog, except I can see everything behind the man. The iron gates I walked through, I could see them clear as day through his chest. He's not silvery or ethereal, but just faded. He's wearing overalls and green boots, but most starkly, in his left hand is a watering can. His expression is totally blank, but is 100% looking at me. The dog is just a dog, but it's on a lead, and it's straining to get at me, and I can hear it growling. Remember earlier when I mentioned the dampening of sound? Well, that had intensified, and all I could hear was the dog growling. But it wasn't like hearing it from the 20-ish yards away. No, it was like it was inside my head. It's about now I finally think, yeah, I'm going to run. And just as I think that, the man and the dog move as one, like moving a model on a base across the table. Their legs didn't move, they just traversed the space. They zipped up to me, passed through my right side, which immediately went numb and taut. I do about 3 pirouettes with the sheer force and shock of it, and the next thing I know, they vanished, and I'm booking it. Through the 5-meter-tall wooden back door, through the eerie basement levels, up the back stairs, up more stairs, and more, taking them 3 at a time. I'm into the main house section now, where things are more ornate. I take a shortcut using my stolen teacher clearance swipe card, which of course blinks red at me twice before I get it to blink green and let me in. And practically baseball slide my dumb ass through the door. My 3 friends who lived with me that year heard me come in and saw me in a real mess. I tell them what happened. Safe to say I opened the whiskey I had smuggled in and hid under my loose panel. We all needed it, judging by how white they'd all gone, and that's the story. It sounds so dramatic, but I guess that's fitting for a ghost story from a performing arts school. But I'm telling you precisely how I remember it. It was a freaking gardener ghost. Not a ghost story, but definitely supernatural. Written by Marlusa. I've had many paranormal and supernatural experiences in my life. What I'm about to share is not a ghost story, but it is supernatural, and something that I've never been able to explain. It is a period of my life that I will never forget. For a span of 18 months, from March 2012 to September 2013, I would experience a disturbing, reoccurring dream almost every night. I would either have this dream or no memorable dream at all. The brief event that surrounds the details of the dream were always exactly the same without any variation. 7 years later, I can still recall this dream as if I had just woken from it. In the dream, I'm sitting in the driver's seat of a vehicle, looking through the eyes of a tall driver. I know I'm not the driver because I look down and to the right. I can see myself sitting in the front passenger seat. We are talking and laughing. The conversation and laughter in the dream are muffled and distant, like voices underwater. Through the eyes of the driver, I look past myself in the passenger seat, through the front passenger window, and see a mass approaching at high velocity. The color and shape of the mass are indeterminable, shifting and flowing through a spectrum of light and space that my mind cannot comprehend. The mass is quickly becoming larger and larger. Suddenly and violently, the mass collides with the front passenger side of the vehicle. This immense kinetic energy surges through my body as if the convulsions of a massive earthquake have been condensed into a single moment, encasing me and penetrating me. Glass implodes from multiple directions like a bomb. This barrier, constructed for protection, transforms into a sea of shrapnel, sending thousands of tiny, sharp teeth to bite and tear and rip and stab at every inch of my skin. The metal frame of the vehicle begins to collapse and rotate as if it is nothing more than paper to be crumpled and tossed away. The space around me is becoming smaller and whirling faster like the motion of an endless roller coaster. My eyes never close and I never look away from the passenger seat. I see myself lurch forward as if I weighed less than air. My face collides with the dashboard. The airbag never deploys. I wake up. For 18 months, I have this dream. For 18 months, I become more stressed and more anxious. I see the dream when I sleep. I see the dream when I'm awake. I could not be in the front passenger seat of any vehicle without feeling my blood pressure rise. It gets to the point where I'm even scared to fall asleep for fear of seeing that event in my dreams. In September 2013, I have the dream for the last time. 1 day passes, 1 week passes, 1 month passes. I still do not have the dream. I do not even question this because I'm so happy to be able to sleep again and not feel fear any time I'm in a vehicle. I feel that long, strange, and terrible period is finally past me. 2 months later, on a beautiful day in November 2013, I'm working at the Visitor Center of the National Wildlife Refuge where I've been employed for over 2 years. It is a slow work day at work, and not many people are coming into the building. The tropical beach is far more interesting than our display murals of informational plaques. I take advantage of the slowness and spend my time reading. Mid-morning arrives, and I hear the chime of the front door ring as soft footsteps enter the visitor center. I look up from my book and see a young couple who seem to be in their early to mid-30s. I greet them, but they do not notice me in the distance. I return my gaze to my book as their attention draws to our murals and plaques. Some time passes before I hear a soft, feminine voice politely say, "Excuse me," from the opposite side of the counter. "Yes," I respond as I look up and smile to meet the eyes of the young woman. But as soon as I face her, her expression very quickly changes from inquiry to shock. She immediately turns to walk away. Without saying another word, she walks from the counter to the wall about 5 meters away. Her husband, presumably sensing her discomfort, walks up to her and puts his arm around her shoulders. They are talking in whispers and I cannot hear. She is visibly upset about something. I think this is very strange at first, but ultimately it's none of my business. I look away from them so they don't feel judged or observed. Many minutes pass and the woman returns to the counter. Her face is a bit puffy and her eyes are a little red. She takes a quick, deep breath and proceeds to ask me about the free cave tours available to visitors of the refuge. Without hesitation, I begin to describe the tour. About 2 minutes pass and she breaks down into full tears. She is crying heavily as her husband rushes back to her side. "I'm so sorry. Was it something I said? Or all I can think to say at this moment?" She wipes her face with the tissues I hand her before taking a breath and speaking again. She apologizes. I reassure her there's nothing to apologize for. What she shares with me is something that will stick with me for the rest of my life. She attended university in Australia and lived there for 10 years. In her decade there, her best friend, a woman who became her sister, looked and spoke exactly like me. She was my complete doppelganger. 2 months earlier, in September 2013, her best friend was involved in a major car accident. Another driver had hit her friend's side of the vehicle, the airbag never deployed, and she died instantly. The airbag never deployed. My heart begins to race, and every ounce of air seems to empty from my lungs. After some time and comforting from her husband, the woman asked if I can go on the cave tour. "Of course," I responded. We go on a tour and return to the visitor center over an hour later. The woman tells me of the plans for the rest of their trip. After a brief silence, she reaches out and gives me a deep hug. "Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye." She keeps repeating slowly in a soft, forlorn whisper as she holds me in her warm embrace. I'm not the hugging type of a person, but I realize that it's not me she's reaching out for. I let her stay there for as long as she needs, returning her hug. After a while, she lets go. She does not look at my face as she turns and walks away. The woman and her husband take each other's hand and walk out the door. I never saw them again. Because he's standing right behind you. Haunting in my house with some evidence to support it. Written by Amber. I've been sitting on this for a bit for a few reasons. It is really long. I wanted to be able to gather facts to support my story, and quite frankly, I didn't want to type it up while in my house. As you can tell with my stories on my page, I have been engulfed in the gray of this world since I was a child. Until recently, I've never met someone who was as sensitive as me. It was enlightening and equally terrifying. So here's my story. I've been renting my house from a family member for several years now. Since day one, I knew it was haunted. I could feel the energy change the moment I stepped inside, but I couldn't tell it wasn't necessarily negative. I'm not a stranger to the paranormal, so when little things would happen like items moving or going missing, inaudible conversations in other rooms, or even my dog looking at an empty corner or wall, I wouldn't usually react. I even nicknamed the ghost Bernadette and would jokingly ask her to stop it. However, within the last 6 months, the activity has intensified. I've had individuals in my house who are complete skeptics, but they have witnessed glasses thrown across the room and shatter everywhere. Pictures falling from the wall, something or someone walking down the empty hallway and hearing it, and hearing people talking that weren't there. I even had to have my brother check that my gas alarm was still active because of the random areas in the house smelling like rotten eggs. Halloween night, I had a very small get-together of about 6 people. One of my guests brought her wife, who I had only met one other time. While my friends were playing games and passing out candy, my friend's wife, we'll call her Emily, pulled me to the side. She seemed upset and stated that she needed to discuss something with me. She first asked me if I knew about Mary. I'm running names through my head that my coworker had mentioned, and I've never heard of a Mary. I obviously tell her no, and she proceeds to tell me a very detailed story about my house. She explained that I had 3 spirits in my house: a spirit named Mary, a spirit named Franklin, and that I had a spirit who was always with me named Gary, at least she thinks. She stated Mary had died in the house a long time ago. Franklin had died on the land before Mary from a plowing accident and was still in his death state. She also confirmed my suspicions of extra activity. A few nights prior, in the middle of the night, I was in bed and I jumped up from my sleep from a huge bang against my bedroom wall, and a picture falling onto the end of my bed. Obviously, I was startled and especially spooked when I could see the indentation in my wall from what appeared to be something that had hit it. I jokingly said, "Not cool, Bernadette," and went back to bed. Emily knew about this. She knew he had hit my wall and said it was Franklin's way of trying to get my attention. That when things are thrown in the house or fall off a wall, that it is Franklin. Apparently, he is angry because I don't react. In my mind, at this moment, I'm thinking, who the hell is this woman? I don't know her, and I haven't told anything to her wife about my creepy house. I'm open with my experiences on here, but I'm very hush in person because of others' reactions. So I ask, how do you know this stuff? And her response still, as I am typing, sends chills to my bones, because he is standing right behind you. First reaction is to look behind me. Nothing's there. Second reaction is to ask why I can't see him. He doesn't want me to. The third reaction is, why does he want to scare me? He wants attention. Since that night, the activity in my previously mildly creepy house has been off the charts. I don't get spooked easy. I have seen things that you see on horror movies, but my house is scary. The energy has shifted. I feel like I'm constantly on flight or flight mode. I am typing this at work because I feel like someone is constantly looking over my shoulder, and I don't want whatever or whoever it is to read this. I know I sound crazy. It's just me and my dog in the house, and even he has been acting differently. I've caught him multiple times sitting in the hall looking at nothing, whimpering, and then he just runs under the bed. I literally have to drag him out. When I'm changing clothes or taking a shower, I feel uncomfortable because I feel like someone is watching me. The house is nearly unbearable to live in at this moment, and I've been at a loss on how to make it go back to my mildly spooky house. I've used my sage twice now, and I think it just pisses Franklin off. With that being said, I have amazing friends and connections to the historic site in my town. With some research, I found Mary and some other interesting details. Mary Frank, 48, died suddenly in my house on August 26, 1919, for neuralgia. Her spouse, Charles Frank, held the funeral in my house. I haven't been able to find a Franklin yet. However, before the Franks occupied my house, it was a stable for horses. It could be a huge coincidence that Mary's last name is Frank, and maybe Emily didn't get a clear message. I'm honestly not sure. I have asked her since, and she still thinks his name is Franklin. She has even come back to my house and told him to stop. He won't listen. I do plan to keep researching the area for a man named Franklin, but I'm not sure there will be any documentation. Another interesting thing is that I do, or did know a Gary, and he has actually been brought up before. Gary was my mother's best friend's husband, who passed away from a heart attack when I was young. At the time, we lived on 20 plus acres of land, and he loved to go hunting on our property. When he passed, it was his wishes to have his ashes spread on our land. I was told many years ago that Gary watched over me. I know the activity in my house is increasing. I'm not 100% sure why. Maybe because I'm more aware now. But I don't feel in danger. I never have because I know Gary is there. Now I've heard it from multiple sources. I'm going to try and attach the picture. I've never had the best of luck with adding them. The picture is of Mary's obituary and the lovely spot someone or something put in my wall. I'm sharing this maybe for insight or just an interesting read. The Crying Woman. A true, current, scary story. Written by user uglylittlemungbean. It was about 1 or 2 in the morning when I was browsing on YouTube. I had my earphones in, scrolling through the different videos of my usual YouTubers that I watch for entertainment. I always had trouble sleeping, so I always turned to videos in an attempt to make myself sleepy. I was halfway through a pretty funny and lighthearted video when I suddenly started hearing a faint weeping, growing louder and louder. I tried to figure out what was going on with the video. It didn't seem to be a part of the music that I was playing. I paused the video, and still I heard the weeping. I take out my earphones to listen more carefully, and turned on my lamp next to my bed. As I sat up, that's when I finally realized that it was coming right outside of my bedroom door, and into the hallway where my other family members' bedrooms were. I sat there trying to think who it could be, and figured it must have been my little brother who tried to get up for the toilet but got scared halfway through the hallway. Like the good big sister I was, I got up to go get him. As I got closer to the door, it sounded like he was right outside of my bedroom. I grabbed the handle and I turned it. It made a clicking sound. A startled gasp could be heard, and the crying stopped. I peeked into the hallway, expecting to see my brother, but no one was there. I proceeded to check all of my family members. I figured maybe I heard my mom or little sister, who might have been the one behind the weeps and sobs. Goosebumps scattered all over my body to my disturbance. Everyone was deeply asleep. I was the only one awake. The next few days, I kind of forgot about that night. Soon, everything slowly went back to normal, so it seemed. That is until a few weeks later, on one night, around 9 p.m., usually when my brother and sister would go to sleep for school, I was still awake, doing my usual scrolling through YouTube, when my little brother came into my room looking half asleep and concerned. I asked him what was wrong. He replied, "Are you okay, sissy?" "What do you mean?" I looked at him with a confused look. He then went on to explain to me that my crying woke him up. Then he walked back to his room. I'm a little bit ashamed to admit this, but I slept in my sister's room last night. Even though it all has happened earlier in the year, I still feel uncomfortable being in my own room and feel this weird, intense, heavy feeling in my chest. I haven't heard the woman's cries since, but sometimes out of nowhere, I feel like crying too. I hope you all enjoyed all of our haunted tales this evening. If you would like to discuss any of the stories on tonight's podcast, or just chat live with me, I'm always live during and after the podcast every Sunday night starting at 7 p.m. Join our community on our Facebook group page and YouTube channel. If you have a haunting story of your own or artwork and you want to submit it for consideration for the future show, drop me a line on our Reddit page or email address. All our links are below in the description. Special thanks to Darken Mood, Darken_M00D, for all his wonderful art that you can check out on his Reddit page. I want to thank all our brave storytellers, for without them there would be no show. A detailed list of story credits are in the description. But most importantly, I want to thank you, the listener, for taking time out of your day to listen to Haunted Tales from the Old Rocking Chair. I hope you have a wonderful night, and as always, sweet dreams. Power off. All right, well, that's tonight's episode of Haunting Tales from the Old Rocking Chair. I hope you all enjoyed it. I think I finally figured out a setup that doesn't cause too much issues. I was able to share out somewhat. Hopefully, in the next couple months, I'll get my computer built and have some improvements on sharing and audio quality and video quality. But until then, this is what we're doing. I hope it was okay for everybody. I hope everyone has a wonderful night. And as always, sweet dreams.